Good morning, Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Chav Daled. Basically, we had a question in the Gemara, a contradiction or an argument, perhaps, or a contradiction between our Mishnah and a Brisa regarding as to whether you can, do we suspect goyim for bestiality? Can you take an animal and buy it from them? And the Mishnah clearly says that you're not allowed to because we don't trust them, and yet the Brisa clearly says that you can purchase animals for a carbon from a goy. So we had so far two answers in the Gemara. One answer the Gemara had is that it depends if it's if the guy's animal or if it's your animal. Your animal was suspected for bestiality, but their own animal, they're not going to ruin their own animal, so therefore that's what the Bryce is talking about. You can buy their animal from them. Then we had Ravina's answer. He says we had Ravina's answer. He says there's a difference. The you shouldn't buy for them, but if you talk about the past, because we're scared in the future, but for the past tense, we can say that nothing really happened. You could buy. That's a difference. Now we're up to answer number 3. We're up to the Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, about 10, 12 lines from the top of the page. Rapidos gives a third answer. In fact, there's an argument. The Mishnah and the Bryce are two different authors, and therefore there's an argument. Who's arguing? One Tana, our Mishnah would be Rabbi Lezer, who says that we do suspect them of bestiality, and the Bryce goes to Kornacham, who does not suspect them of bestiality. And where do we find such a machlekes? He will explain. So he says, Rapidos Amar Leikash Ho Rabbi Lezer Ho Rabbanon. Now, how do I know that they're arguing? And Rabbi Lezer is also of our Mishnah. He worries about bestiality. We learned regarding Paras Chatas, a Paraduma. Regarding a Paraduma, Rabbi Lezer, you cannot purchase a Paraduma from a guy. And why not? We'll see in a minute. He's going to say, because we're is bestiality. And the Chachamim are matir. The Chachamim are matir. Oh, something we'll talk about it. My lab isn't this the argument? Rabbi Lezer saw, but Rabbi Lezer worried about Chashin L'Reviyah. Therefore, he worried about bestiality. Therefore, you cannot buy from a guy a paraduma. And the Rabban hold loy Chashin L'Reviyah. We're not worried about Reviyah. Says the Gemara B'mai. How do you know that that's the? You're coming up now with a new idea that there's a machlekes whether we're concerned about bestiality or not. How do you know that that's the svara of this argument? I can give you another way, another approach. Deal Modukuli Alma. Everyone holds loy Chashin L'Reviyah. Maybe we're not worried about it, like the Bryson. No one's worried about bestiality. And time, you know what's going on here? Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Rabbi Lezer is following Rabbi Yehuda Marav. What's that? Rabbi Yehuda Marav, he niach aleyin. If you place, it says in the pasuk, Shaloi olole oil, then the animal cannot carry anything. He niach aleyin uda shall sakin. Let's say you placed on them a bunch of empty sacks, which doesn't weigh much, and for whatever reason, you're too tired to carry it, so you place it on your animal. Puzzle is puzzle. So just by placing that on it, you're already puzzled. Well, the egla, when it comes to egla rufa, there the tater, no, just putting it on it. The animal didn't move, didn't walk, didn't do anything. You just put it there for a minute to rest. You're ready, oil. That's it. The animal's rendered puzzle. However, the egla, when it comes to egla rufa, there the tater says that it shouldn't be doing anything. Placing it on the animal does not render it disqualified to be used as the egla rufa. When somebody found murder, corpse is found, we don't know who did it, which city committed a crime. They bring an egla karufa and they make a kapara, egla rufa. But there, only the animal walk with it, not just you placed it on it. Mar says chashin. And therefore, that's the concern. Since it's so easy to render a paraduma apostle, Rabbi Lezer says we're worried that maybe the guy placed something on it, during the years that was with the guy. And I'm not worried. Nothing to do with bestiality. Maybe everyone holds we're not worried about bestiality. Because if everyone held that you are worried about bestiality, why would the Chacham allow you to buy an animal? So it must be everyone holds that you're not worried. So no, you can't even say that. Why? Because no matter what, you know how much a paradum is worth? Because the slightest pleasure that he could take his sacks for a minute and put it on the animal, he's going to risk the fortune of the value of this animal. He knows that once he put it on it is possible. Anyone who's grooming a paraduma, they look up all the dinim. They know they're going to also look up all the to make sure that their animal is kosher for a paraduma. He wouldn't do that. So Freddy Gemara, if you believe in that svara, how could it be chosher bestiality? Because of his desire for bestiality, he's going to ruin such a valuable animal. He's not going to lose so much of this small hana. Why is it small? Because it's fleeting. 5 minutes is over. So the Gemara says there, Hasam Yitzchak Taikvei, the Yetzirah for bestiality is so overwhelming as well, just like we say for general arroyas, that he's willing to take the risk. So therefore, bestiality maybe we're chayshish, and we're not chayshish for this. So if we're not chayshish for this, so what's the possible machlekes of lezer chachamim? Why can you buy a part of chatzos from a goy or not? Must be whether we're chayshish or bestiality, and that's a machlekes in the Mishnah in the Brayse. Said who said the deal everyone said we're not worried about a via. So why does the blazer say you cannot buy a paraduma from a goya? Different reason altogether. Nothing to do with bestiality, nothing to do with psul, but rather the Tony Shayla my time of blazer, the way Shayla understood the time of blazer. It says in the passage by Chukas, beginning of Chukas, Dabra b'nei Yisrael, the Yikchu Elecha b'nei Yisrael. So normally b'tayich you should bring it. Right, you should bring the Moshe Rabbeinu. This talks about it many times. We're going to touch v'yichel means to sell. V'yichel also means to sell. As the Rashi says, v'yichel can mean v'yakichu. You read it with the vowels of the yakichu, that you should, begin to be taken by others, sell to them. So the yichel, who can sell to you? Only b'nei Yisrael. Nothing to do with bestiality, nothing. And Goyim can't sell to you. So the Gemara talks that it can't be. The Tani Sefer says, and it says after later on, not only did he pass a paraduma from a goy, but he passes all animals and for any carbon from a goy. If it's a specific din that's inherent with paraduma, because it says so why would other carbon be possible? But if you learn like we learned, because he's chayshish bestiality, so no carbon is kosher because like we had before, that never the muksa, and so too nirba is possible for a carbon. So it must be Rabbi Elazar's father is bestiality, and the Chachamim who argue must be because they don't hold bestiality. That's how Rabbi Elazar wants to explain. Where does it say kuch by them? Says the Gemara is still going on because you're making a machlekes that we never heard of. So the Gemara, and we gave two ways of reconciling the Mishnah of Baraisa, and you're coming up with a Rabbi an idea that maybe there's a machlekes to Tanaim, and your whole basis this is Baraisa here about paraduma. Maybe it's another way of explaining it. Maybe the only that was the Demelia cutting because it's worth a lot of money. So therefore, maybe the Rabbanon also, maybe everyone agrees we are chayshish to the via, and therefore your explanation of the Mishnah B'nai is wrong. You tell me there's a machlekes here, maybe it's only paraduma. Why the Chacham is not worried about the via over here? For the svara we said before, that it's so valuable. Even this Yetzer Hara is not going to be strong enough to risk all that thing. And I believe no, Yetzer Hara is so strong that they can't withstand resist that Yetzer Hara. So they're arguing over here, but everywhere else, everyone agrees that we're chayshish for the via. So that's a machlekes. Maybe the Chacham. You're coming up with a chiddush. You have to find a source for your chiddush that the Chacham hold on a chayshish of you. Because you want to have to come. A source already came to Baraisa. But the Tanya is first of all, so the Baraisa we brought before, which started this whole question. It says clearly you could purchase an animal or carbon money. Who's the author of the Baraisa? If you don't learn my way, then who's the author of the Brayse? The Brayse, you're telling me everyone's chayshish for the via. The only machlekes is going paraduma. So how can the Brayse you can buy from a and we don't like the answer of B'diavad, and we don't like the answer of Rav Dawar that people don't want to be matrish their own animal, so they weaken their own uproot cause harm to their own animal. So it must be that this Brayse hold is no via, which is obvious. It must be it's a chacham. Who else can it be? Tanya behedya. We learn clearly, Maya Sibli Chavra it says further in the Baraisa. What was the question that Chacham asked Rabbi Elazar? They asked Rabbi Elazar in the Pasuk that Kol Tzayin Kedar, all the Tzayin from the Yishmaelim, Yikbutzu Elecha will join you, Mashiach will come, Chulu Al Mizbechi, and they all be brought, Arotz and Mizbechi, all be brought into the Beis Hamikdash, Arotz. So we're going to accept Goyish Karbonis in the future, which clearly shows that we're not chayshish for the via. So we're not chayshish for the via. Because they're talking about all kabbanis. They're not talking about paraduma. The way you wanted to learn is only by paraduma. Here we learn, and they're arguing because the meyakari, not the meyakari, will you hold back the Yetzer or not? No, it's clear that even all kabbanis say you can buy from a guy. That there's no chash or the via korachamim. Interesting that the Rishonim say this whole Gemara is talking about the olden days, not today. And here, this pasuk is talking about the future, and we're still chayshish for the via, unless a relapse. So the Gemara. Ad can lay please. So the whole machlekes said the Chacham Rabbi is only b'chshasha. Are we chayshish for such a thing or not? But if we know for a fact, I will hechad the badai Rabbi Psula. But when it comes to paraduma, when it comes to other kabbanas, we learn from Perish. We're not saying that not all the kabbanas are kosher, not all the animals are kosher for a carbon, and we said which ones are not. Never, muktzah, never, roivea, and you're fine. What about paraduma? It seems clearly from the Gemara we learn now. We're digressing. Paraduma, it seems clearly from here right now that by paraduma, the only machlek is a chavra is. Are we worried that the guy, is going to risk everything? Paraduma not. Or we chayshe for the vices, but if you know for a fact that there was review here, the paraduma is possible. Why should it be possible? Because the question is, what is paraduma? Is it really a carbon? Then how come it's not brought in the base of English? Bringing the carbonates outside the base of English. The other possibility is bedek habayis, to maintain the structure of the base of English, because the kohenim cannot serve in the base of English unless they have paraduma. So is it bedek habayis or is it paraduma? Because the bedek habayis, anything can be donated to the bedek habayis. An animal with a mum can be donated. It doesn't matter. So why should paraduma be possible for if it was nirba if it's bedek habayis? The fact that everyone is minded that it's possible if it was nirba must be it's a carbon. So then if it's a carbon, so then anything bedek habayis is not good. Why paraduma? That's by karbonis because it's so good. That's for karbonis. That's only on the mizbeach. This is not a carbon. If it's bedek habayis, then we don't care what it is. It's the value of it. So I might have to minute. If it's bedek habayis, you can be paid. You don't have to wait for a mum. If something was set aside for a carbon and then you decide you want to take it back, if you want to redeem it, you have to wait till it has a mum. It's no longer suitable for the base of English. Only then can you. And then you have hamod of harocha. The animal has to be able to stand, and then you have to assess it. If it's bedek habayis, you don't need none of these requirements. So what is the status of paraduma? It seems to me that it's a carbon. Because you're telling me that nirba is possible because everybody. So the machlek is what the chayshish for you. He's ready. You want to say, "Ad kan le pligi ele b'kshash." See, the whole machlek is revolves around the chash. Avol heichad devadir of psol. But if let's say it's possible, but if let's say definitely it happened, it's possible. Shmam no para kachim veich. L'chayde is a raya from here that what the paradum is a kachim mizbech. Why? Because kachim bedek habayis even can be sachakos only bedek habayis. Mi mipsle baravia. Where do you find that bedek habayis that the via should be possible? Says Gemara, you're right. Maybe that paraduma take is a bedek habayis. Navas, why do we pass on the via shiny para? Because the chatas karya rachmana. The Torah itself refers to it as a korban chatas, and because it says lemei neither chatasi. Because the Torah that literally chatasi means that it cleans you out. But over here also teaching that chatasi means the korban chatas. So the Torah itself confers to it the label korban chatas. So really is bedek habayis. Really is bedek habayis. But regarding psulin, it has the status of a carbon that whatever is possible by a carbon is possible over here as well. And therefore, the B is possible. Because the Torah called it chatas. Why else would the Torah call it chatas? If you tell me it's like a carbon comes to psulim, there are other psulim that should be included. We know that a carbon has to be born natural birth, it to be kosher as a carbon, and we'll learn later in the Gemara's kosher. But if it's a yaitze deifen, you cannot a cesarean. You cannot bring it up as a carbon. Now, according to you, since a carbon a paraduma is called a chatas, that then should apply to a paraduma as well. Now, what's the problem? Maybe Taka does. Maybe Taka does. Maybe a paraduma cannot be born from a cesarean. Allah Matanya, why did we talk about Abeleza? So why did we learn in Abeleza Psula? If you were Magdish a paraduma that came out through cesarean, it's possible, and Abshima Machsha. Abshima says a kosher. Now, if everyone agrees that really it's possible, and why? Because of the korban chatas, how could Abshima be Machsha? How can we Machsha? You can tell us not a problem. Because Rav Shimon holds regarding other matters as well that a Yotze Deifen is considered like a natural birth. When it comes to a woman, how long she sits tummy? 7 days and 14 days for Zohar and the Keva. The first 7 days after she gives birth by a male, 7 days that she's tummy, and then 33 days of Tara, and by a girl is 14 and then 66 days. So we say that din is dafka only if it's born, because Yivole. Rav Shimon holds because it says Yivole twice. The din is that a cesarean is just like a natural birth. So therefore, maybe the same thing applies to behemoth. Maybe Rav Shimon holds that by a behema also, a cesarean, just like a natural birth. Nothing to do with the fact that it's a even if it's a carbon, it's still kosher, maybe. Rav Shimon time made somebody holds that's a different blood malyu is considered and recognized as an ordinary child. In your country and Kaddish is only by birth, by a human, because it says twice kiyavole. That's why he says the extra one to tell you that even if it's born unnaturally. But by a carbon, we don't have that extra pasuk. So by a carbon, that it could only be born in a natural birth. Ella shiny Potter is different. Hoyelumum poiselba. Potter is different. You know why Potter is different? Because a mum passes by it. And what is that? Because a mum by a Potter duma passes by it, sounds like that it has certain din like carbon. Yeah. And therefore we also add to that the erba nami poiselba. We'll also add to it anything that renders a carbon possible because it's not a mum, but because of erva, bestiality, or because you put aside for Avodah Zarah. Again, it's not a mum, but it's possible. The same thing applies to paraduma. You see, it says, mum bum. It says, so Gemara now coming up with a new reason, not because it says the word chatas. Really, it's bedek abayis. Nothing to do with chatas. You want to know why it's possible for a nir, but no, not because it's called a chatas. The reason why it's possible is because by bedek abayis, since a mum passed by paradumas, it says asher ein bo mum. By paraduma clearly says asher ein bo mum. So we see mum passes. So therefore, anything where a mum passes, and by paraduma clearly it says, even though it's bedek abayis, let's say it's bedek abayis. Forget what we said that's similar to a carbon. Even with bedek abayis, the Torah clearly says that kol mum boy. So therefore, because it has no mum, we also extend that and we add in Avodah Zarah and nirba. How do we know that? Als mumen. And if he knows bedek abayis, forget carbon. And that's what Shimon holds a cesarean, is still kosher because it don't do with carbon. It's bedek abayis. But Ton is better bishmo. Kol mokshin hashchas. Whatever it says in pasuk, kimushchasim bam mum bam. It says they have a mum, and it says there that mashchasim bahem mum bam lo yiratzulachat. So it talks about you should not take for a benecha the carbon. So because it talks about over there in the same pasuk where it talks about a mashchasim, it says mum bam, and we touch what's mashchasim bam, and it says right next to mum bam. What are we talking about? It's what's hashchasim? We're touching mashchasim means that it's fadarbid. It's been ruined. In what way? The word shchasa, whenever Torah says they're corrupt, what avedas did they do to make them corrupt? Avodah Zarah and Gilaroy. So how do I know that? Avodah Zarah, whatever the Torah says, by the Mabul, it says that they all were corrupt and called basa, each one misbehaved as their way. So, right, debauchery and all that, that's hishchis. Allah is in this world. And Avodah Zarah, it says in the pasuk that so you did make Avodah Zarah, kapen tashchisun v'asis lechem pesel. Again, we find the same expression hashchasun when it comes to pesel, making Avodah Zarah. So so that's what he's talking about over there. They said Gemara v'hapoda nami hoyel mum poisel ba. So what answers? Poda nami hoyel mum poisel ba v'avodah kam poisel ba. So poda duma. The way this Gemara remains, and I'm trying to talk about it, is better kabayis. Why do you want to know why is possible? It's because of this pasuk better kabayis. Since the Torah clearly isolates paraduma from everything else, it says that a mum passes, and whatever says mum, it says it also includes a spiritual moment like Avodah Zarah and others. So the Gemara, let's analyze what we said before. We said before that Shela has a new pshat by paraduma, and you know why Rabbi Lezer says that paraduma you bought from a guy is no good because the Torah says v'yichol you have to take him. We say v'yikichu. Right, you should take over here and talk about only Eden can sell, not a guy. Tani, Tani, might have a lot of see. That b'nei Yisrael, so v'yichol b'nei Yisrael that only Eden can sell to you. Yikachu ve'eno yikachu yikachu says v'yichol is b'nei Yisrael yikachu only Eden can sell to you and not goyim. Because v'yichol eilecha para aduma. V'yichol eilecha that only you. I'm talking about Eden, Moshe Rabbeinu. It follows that logic when it says the yikul doesn't mean to take, it also means to give. So let me ask a question. It says so speak to the truma. This is where they raise funds for the base of Midrash. So the yikul truma, according to you, the yikul means that only Eden should be able to give and take. and not goyim. Right? Goyim cannot. You just tell me that means only Eden. So it means only Eden can donate to the base of Mikdash, and not goyim can donate to the base of Mikdash. That's a question. This is what you asked before. Shalus Rabbi Lezer. They once asked Rabbi Lezer, "Heichen kibbut avim." How far do you have to take kibbut avim? Have this whole sugi kedushin. So the story is, Amalem Tsuru, go and learn Mara. Also, Echad, but this one person, Dama ben Asina, Lavi Bashkelon, but Dama ben Asina Shmai. His name was Dama ben Asina. Let's see what he did there for kibbut avim. Pamachas once Bikshu Mimenu Avonim leEfos. They wanted to buy Avonim for the Efos. The Shishim Ribu Yischar. 600,000. Imagine those days, 600,000 dinner they were prepared to pay. Of Kahana Master B'Shmoinim you 600,000 enough, 800,000. The keys were underneath the pillow of his father, and he did not. He refused to wake up. He refused to wake up his father. So therefore, what is he from here? But what the bottom line? What did they want to do? They were going to buy from a goy the stones to fill the Avnei Shayim for the ephod. Clear that you can take from a goy. I tell you. Says the Gemara, Avnei Shayim hifsiki inyan. It says the you should take all the things in the base of Mikdash, and then when it comes to the word Avnei Shayim, there's no vote. It doesn't say and. No, Avnei Shayim stops. All the things I mentioned before in the pasuk is only from Eden. Avnei Shayim you can get from anybody you want. But the Gemara of Avnei Meluyim, it says right afterwards, the Avnei Meluyim, the Hadar Arvei, which means that now, because there's an and, the conjunctive and afterwards means it goes right back to the beginning again. So the one who in the sandwich in the middle also goes back to the beginning, even though it doesn't say a Vav there. That's how actually Traces finds it very perplexing. Why can't the Vav here mean just that I'm connecting this to Avnei Shoyim, not going back to the beginning of the pasuk? In fact, Avnei Shoyim starts a new Indian, and now starts a new and. The different has other shouting about it, but that's how Rashi learns. That's mode number 2. But funny safer. Let's continue weiter. Okay, you gave me an answer about Avnei Shoyim. It said weiter, the following year, Noidoloi Paraduma he gave birth to Paraduma, Be'edra in his stad, in his flock. Nichnusu Chacham Yisrael Etzlai, the Chachamim came to him, Amalehem, he said to them, they came to buy. I know that I can ask you any amount. Any price, and you'll give it to me. I'll be cheap. Give me the 600,000 dinner you were planning to give. And you're buying it from a guy, and you said, no question. Forget what we said before. You're not allowed to buy directly from a guy, but if a Yid bought it, so now who's the balabas? A Yid, and you bought it from the Yid. What do you call that? A peddler, a middleman. So the Rishonim all talk about over here is this story had to happen during the second Beis Hamikdash because there was no paraduma at first. Moshe Rabbeinu's paraduma went all the way to Ezra. Ezra then made another 7. So this is happens in Beis Hamikdash, and therefore the discussion is the only way you can use these stones for the ephod is that if the shamir puts the letters in. So that I've made there was a shamir in the second Beis Hamikdash, even though we had gemaras that said that after the first Butler. Once the first Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, there's no longer a shamir. So some of the Shem answer that shamir was available, but it was much harder to find. And as Rishak Shemel had all these problems finding shamir, so in the second Beis Hamikdash it was much harder to find, but they found it. The kitchen I'll say to him as a Shabbat. This story was always perplexing. This story of David ben Asina. Let me ask you a question. If you're the father, and your son is up, and you found out that he could have made a deal of 800,000 dinim, which at that time you would have been the richest man in the world, and because you were asleep, he didn't want to wake you up, and the Chacham was away. What you thinking? What would you say? Exactly. You would say, idiot. What were you thinking? And what bothered me even more is, so why the Chacham just wait till he wakes up? Anyway, I have a bunch of other questions. The kids, perhaps there's no basis for what I'm saying now, but perhaps the Pshat is exactly the opposite. When the Chachamim saw the kind of kibbut of the aim that he did for his father, they felt this would be a kitzur min Shemayim against Yidden. What are you? Ad heiche kibbut of the aim. Rabbi couldn't find a Tarfon, couldn't find all these other ones. He had to go to find a goy. Imagine kind of kitzur min Shemayim. They didn't want to give. They didn't want to give him the chance to go ahead and to do whatever it is behind the midst of things. So they ran away before there was to be a kitzur. and maybe that's why they left. And if you
deal with these
no, not in Kedushin. And here I don't have too many versions for to tell you. But in Kedushin, where the whole sugi is, no, it's a story. It's a difficult story to understand. Anyway, so the Gemara just finished. Actually, we finished Mitzvah Shabbos. Now we're going to try to understand. Rabbi Lezer says you're not allowed to buy paradum from a guy. What's this whole story here? How we're going to explain it according to Rabbi Lezer? And tomorrow's Gemara beautifully explains according to Rabbi Lezer what actually happened here. Okay, have a good Shabbos, everyone. More tomorrow night, 7.